Hey friends, hope you all are well. Thank you very much for joining us on this warm afternoon. I hope you're someplace cool and breezy and pleasant. Um, I'm really excited about this project that we've been working on, making this new music video for a song of mine called Look Away. The song was a long time in the making, and the album was a long time in the making, and the video is a long time in the making. And I'm really proud of all three, and I'm excited to share them with you. So thank you for taking the time to be with me here today. I want to let you know a few things. One, I am not going to be watching the chat, but if you have questions that you want to put to me and or Hannah, there's a question button at the bottom of your screen, I believe. A lot of things have changed recently on Crowdcast, but I believe you can find a question button somewhere that will allow you to ask a question. If not, you can leave it in the chat, and Jess will make sure those questions get over to us. I get so easily distracted, so I'm not going to be watching the chat while we're on the video, though I will go back and read all of it later. So very happy to hear from you. Very glad that you're here. Jess Fox is my good buddy who is moderating today. She's going to be with you in the chat and answering any questions you have, helping out with anything she can. I will tell you now that if you have any technical issues, I recommend a couple things. One, the Chrome browser works best. If you have Chrome, I would switch over to that. And two, turn it off and turn it on again. That's always the tech advice. So those are the two things I would suggest: Chrome browser and turn it off and turn it on again if you have any technical issues. Hopefully you won't. Jess is my longtime friend, and she's going to be with you for any questions that come up during the chat. Otherwise, I will watch and I will read everything up later and respond in due time. I want to welcome my dear friend Hannah Garrity here today. Hannah is a brilliant artist. I've been a fan of her work for a really long time. She works in so many different media. She's a lovely painter. She does sculpture. She's done paper cut work that is just exquisite, that I've enjoyed in Montreat in particular for many years. And I'm just so excited to have gotten to work with her on this. So I just want to welcome Hannah, and we'll fill you in on what we've been doing together here. Let me see if I can find Hannah. There she is. I want to invite her to the main stage.
Yes.
We are, and there comes video. Beautiful.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm really happy to be doing this with you.
Absolutely, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's such a treat. I was thinking back to how this got started, and not so much the song, but the video project. And you were kindly helping me out, lending me some stuff last spring, like a year ago, roughly.
Yep.
Even more, maybe 14 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
In conversation about art and art supplies, and that fell naturally into the realm of what art is for.
Yeah.
And suddenly we had a project cooked up.
Absolutely. The idea that it's so important to be using the creative gifts that we have to forward the positive things in the world, the beloved community. And I specifically think you were mentioning my work, and I think that in your work, one of the things that it really has been powerful in the last few years has been your work with Abraham Jam, which was a really important thing for me, coming from the Christian tradition, to be able to understand how the sounds of different traditions can come together in a way that really leans into nostalgia. And I think that is one of the reasons why I was drawn to this work and this particular project with you.
That's a fascinating insight in terms of the nostalgia piece of Abraham Jam. For those of you who don't know, Abraham Jam is a band that I had for 10 years, no longer touring, sadly, but it's been a beautiful project, and we're all really close. I've heard from both of those guys in the last few days. We stay in touch pretty often. But Abraham Jam is a trio of three artists who have individual careers as musicians, but teamed up to make a trio together, including a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim in a band together. And our thought about that was that harmony is better than unity, or not better, but sometimes even more powerful than unity. As musicians, unity means you're singing the same note, and harmony means you're finding different notes that match, that make each other richer. So that was really a beautiful project. And we sang some old school folk songs. We sang like Get Together by Dino Valenti, and we touched on everybody's nostalgia in that way. And it's fascinating to think about it in that particular light, because what we were trying to do was draw on the power of an old story and recast it into a new story.
Right.
And I never felt so moved by that song as when I sang it with those guys in harmony. It was such an extraordinary thing between these religions that have a long history of conflict to
Right.
say, hey, maybe there's a better story we can grow out of this old story.
Yeah, and so that was really powerful, and I think that when we were talking, leading into this project at that point that you were mentioning, the just the pressure of visual propaganda that's so prevalent online specifically, I really feel that it's important to be giving my gift specifically towards offering a different option for people to share and engage with. And so this was a wonderful opportunity to be able to offer understand visual and musical nostalgia in a positive way, and go moving toward the world we all hope to live in.
Yeah, I love that way of looking at it, Hannah. The idea, I think the common conception of what activism means is standing in the way of things that are wrong. And that is half of activism. That's a really important part of activism. Sometimes we need to stand in the way. The other half is building something better, offering what an academic I cited in my new book called prefigurative movements, people who model a new way of doing it, not just arguing about the direction we should go, but showing you, here's how it's done. And that's a really powerful thing. So yeah, I guess that's what we were trying to do here, isn't it? Trying to tell a better story. And we'll talk more about that, but I guess, what time is it? It's 7 minutes past the hour. Maybe we should cut right to it and show the video to people.
Definitely.
My grandfather's own grandfather walked home from the Civil War, from Virginia to Columbia, SC. I don't know what made him join up, I don't know what he believed, but his legacy is passed right down to me. Way down south in the land of cotton, stories here are not forgotten, except when we prefer to look away. Rules were written to advantage, so the playing field was slanted, and that's how it is still working to this day. Look away, look away, I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven, you can tie a yellow ribbon, but that old oak tree is rotten at the core. Now the monuments to generals are all covered up in canvas, and some people say that's history they're hiding. But those statues tell a story that I cannot celebrate, treating people like those horses they are riding. I must listen to my sisters if I want to understand, though the story is a painful one to hear. If there's any hope of healing, they'll be hurting on the way. I think maybe we should start right now and here. Look away, look away, I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven, you can tie a yellow ribbon, but that old oak tree is rotten at the core. I still love a good long story, I still love a cold sweet tea, I still love the people, black and white, who raised and nourished me. But my people told a story, and that story was a lie. And if we're ever gonna heal this, we gotta look it in the eye. Look away, look away. I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven, you can tie a yellow ribbon, but that old oak tree is rotten at the core. You can claim all is forgiven, you can tie a yellow ribbon, but that old oak tree is rotten at the core.
Um, Hannah, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions actually about
Absolutely.
how this whole thing came to be. First of all, I want to talk about kind of the genre of Southern rock and country as well to some degree. When we set out to do this, you started to do some research on what kind of imagery we might want to be playing with, and I think it, I think visually what we've done here somewhat mirrors what I was trying to do in the writing of the song in the first place, in the production. So yeah, talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite genre of music, and I think we have talked over the course of the project of really our love of being from the South and really loving so many aspects of being Southern. And this genre of music is one that does also connect me emotionally to anytime I hear songs, and to the point that I think that we've been working on. Trying to put it together and make the visual happen was a real great exploration. So the first thing I did was do an inspiration board. So I did a lot of research and study of how to how the genre of music video really looks on any platform. MTV is one place. There are lots of other places where people put together music videos, YouTube. And so I was looking specifically at the Southern rock genre because that was the one that you mentioned as really leaning into musically. So some of the things I was noticing were horses and fields, and really the beautiful Americana rural landscapes. And then one of the things that you mentioned in the song, the cold sweet tea line, really drew me to the rocking chairs and storytelling of my childhood. So it was in some of the videos, but that motif was something that was really important to me to bring forward from my past and into this space and message. And then the back of the pickup truck concept, we didn't do that exact thing, but that's really big in the music video genre. And so as people could see, the places we were in front of a space at Camp Greer called the Trading Post, and the old-timey microphone really cast that particular look that I was going for.
Yeah, it's fun. We're dating ourselves ever so slightly, talking about back when videos were on MTV.
I know, right?
Yeah, but that's what I grew up on. I was in high school when MTV launched, and you're a little younger than me, but yeah, that was absolutely my generation. And I think it's interesting. Part of what we were consciously doing in this project was playing with some tropes, playing with some rather cliched imagery, because I think in most poetry classes and most creative writing classes, people will tell you, don't, avoid cliches, learn how to not write with cliches because they're worn out and they have no energy left in them because you've heard it so many times and so it just feels trite. That's true unless you're taking the cliche and redefining it.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to harness all the power of expectation that is denied, right? And artistically, that's an interesting thing to do. I had fun with that back many years ago when I wrote my song Deadline. The chorus says, there's no time like the present, and there's no present like time. If it had just said, there's no time like the present, that would have been really trite. But I think I got to redeem it a little bit by flipping the phrase backwards and saying, oh, that's also true. And I hadn't thought about it that way before. So it was a conscious decision that we talked about quite a lot to work with the rocking chairs and the horses and the barn gate and all that kind of stuff, right? And lots of rural kind of imagery. And of course, a lot of the South isn't rural, but disproportionately rural life is represented on all the videos. So it's fascinating to play with all that. And I come from people who are pretty rural, right? Arguably on both sides of my family, but certainly on one side, on my mom's side, folks were farmers, and a couple generations back, that's what was happening. And my uncle was a tobacco farmer and a pig farmer, and spent a lot of time going to see him as a kid. And he's somebody that I really loved and continue to love, though he's not with us anymore. So that's a part of my own identity that I really treasure, even though it's not something that people immediately perceive in me because of the particular peculiarities of my accent and different things. So it's interesting to claim that and to claim it proudly. And I love Southern rock. I grew up listening to the Allman Brothers, and I've got a couple of the guys from Lynyrd Skynyrd on different songs on my albums, and I've gotten to play with Warren Haynes from Allman Brothers and Government Mule, and I love that stuff. So to say something that feels authentic to me in a genre that feels authentic to me, it's a part of me. But to twist the story a little felt like a worthwhile project.
Well, and it leans into a yearning that I think maybe it's shared by many, not just us, but the idea that other messages that I resonate with more could enter into this creative space, which I really love. I would love to know how we talked about it through the project a little bit, but how were you thinking about creating this particular genre in your music for this song?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were a lot of production choices, and then there were a lot of the choices in the writing as well, of course. And so, we had really good electric guitar on this record, and it was a delight to get to play with these great musicians who really could kick it and make it rock. So to give it that sound was something we were very intentional about in the studio. In terms of the writing of the song, it started out just me telling an honest story, which is to say that my grandfather's grandfather was a Civil War soldier fighting for the Confederacy. That's part of my legacy. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that's true, and that does leave me with some responsibility. I was speaking yesterday with somebody who brought up the expression white guilt, and I said, yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between guilt and responsibility, right? Guilt tends to be a dead end. It's immobilizing, but responsibility calls you to action. And the fact that I have received benefits that I wasn't necessarily entitled to because of structures in our society that kind of tend to push things in my direction, I have some responsibility to address that and to see if we can come up with a better way. In the same way that, if you buy a bike from somebody and then you find out it was stolen, you still got to give the bike back, like there's responsibility, even if you weren't the one who was there and did that thing. If the goods come to you, then you can actually be you can be convicted of receiving stolen goods, right? And I feel like that's something I need to reckon with in my own history, because the systems that were in place for the last generations and are still in place to a great degree tend to tilt in my favor.
Mm-hmm.
I need to acknowledge in this conversation that I was dealt pretty much all of the standard privilege cards, right? Male, white, straight, cisgendered, US passport, fairly neutral accent, et cetera, et cetera. So all those things don't make me a good person or a bad person, but they do mean that it's harder for me to understand what's going on around me.
Mm-hmm.
And said in the song, I must listen to my sisters if I want to understand, though the story is a painful one to hear. So, you know, you and I, as white presenting folk,
Mm-hmm.
are having this conversation about racism, and it's really important to me to acknowledge that we only have a little bit of perspective on this from our particular social locations. And I felt in the creation, circling back to your question, in the creation of this song, I didn't feel like it was mine to speak for anybody else. But my story intersects with this larger social question
Mm-hmm.
in a particular way. And it felt important for me to be honest about that and put it out there. So that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, and I would agree with in terms of family history and cards dealt. I'm a woman, obviously, so I'm missing one of those cards, but otherwise I had much of the same privilege. And so thinking forward into next generations, this has been a really critical exploration for me because of the title of the song and the subtle way that historically, even though social things were happening in all of these years that we've been in the United States of America since the beginning of it, all of the last 400 or more since slavery began in the United States of America, people have looked away in a really subtle way in the social location that I come from. So and I think that since the death of George Floyd, we were really looking at it during the pandemic as a society, and I can already sense this feeling that it could be easy to look away. And I think that this particular project was important for me to do because it's a way to look at it for people who are coming from my same background. And I think that for me, that was why it feels authentic.
Yeah.
Important
Yeah,
for me.
and of course, sorry, you were saying.
No, it's just important for me to keep my eyes on it in order to continue moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, of course, where the song came from. I actually had that idea in my head for years before I wrote the song, that I realized years ago at some point that anthem, Dixie, that anthem of the Confederacy, unofficially, says that in the chorus over and over again: look away, look away, look away. And feels like that's what we've been doing for a very long time. And I don't think that served us very well. So I think it's worth considering another path.
Well, it's interesting because my looking away can cause someone else to be in danger. And I think that that's why I need to look at it. And so it's subtle.
Yeah, it's very subtle. All of this is really subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you live in Richmond.
Yeah. So in the video, we see the monuments in downtown Richmond from during the pandemic. We had monuments that were taken down after the murder of George Floyd and the protests that happened at that time in downtown Richmond. Really, it was an incredible time, and it was a time that these monuments that had been propaganda became art for a moment before they were taken down, because art is always a conversation. And so once they were spray painted and they became the conversation, we were able to have that conversation as a society for a few years. And during that time, we marched, and my son's looking at the monument at the Robert E. Lee monument, and my husband and I were taking pictures during the march. So you'll see those come visually in the back of the video.
Those images are right there in the video, and extremely personal.
Mm-hmm.
A conversation with a guy on a plane a couple of years ago, who was talking about this issue to me, and I was listening, and he was saying, you know, it's people want to cover up history, like taking these monuments down, and I'm thinking, really the way I see it, right? That I think there are two things to consider there. One is that the monuments were an inaccurate telling of history to begin with, and then if anything, we're correcting the record, because most, of course, were put up at a time of racial progress in order to absolutely stand in the way of that progress, not following the Civil War. But also, I think it's just really important to consider where we keep history. We keep history in museums and in textbooks, but monuments, statues that we put in the middle of our cities are things that you literally look up to. These are the statements that we, and you and I have talked about this at great length, these are the statements that of what we admire. And so I think we got to be really careful about what we erect as a monument. And take those monuments and put them in museums, I think is completely appropriate, where they can context. You know, there can be places to look at this, but there should be context in terms of when it went up, who put it up, who paid for it, why, what were they responding to in the moment, what was the message that was trying to be conveyed. So I felt like I needed to address that. That also shows up in the song. The monuments to generals are all covered up in canvas, and some people say that's history, they're hiding. But the statues tell a story that I cannot celebrate, treating people like those horses they are riding. So, yeah, all of this is really, so many of my songs are just a reckoning for me, a wrestling with what it is that I believe, what I need to stand for, right? And that's a challenging question for me. There's so many things that I feel like I do need to stand for that I'm not really putting the energy into right now. There are many ways in which I'm looking away, and I'd like to do better, right? So this is in some ways an exhortation to myself, and y'all are allowed to listen as I encourage myself to show up for fairness. The word justice is so loaded for some people. Sometimes I say fairness instead, because not many people object to that, and it means the same thing. So at any rate, it is 2:30 already. How can that be, Hannah? We've been here for half an hour. I think I might want to turn to some other folks here.
Yeah, wonderful.
What else has happened? I'm taking these glasses off because you're looking at this big light in my glasses if I wear them. Yeah, so let's see if other folks have questions and want to join the conversation here. I'm going to come back to the chat, and if y'all have thoughts or questions, please put them right there in the chat. I'd be delighted to hear what you're thinking. And I'm going to catch up a little bit because I haven't been looking at it. Oh yeah, Jody Welker was talking about his time in Richmond on Monument Avenue as well. Lisa, that's such a great question. Yeah, no, I did not grow the facial hair specifically for the video, but it really does seem to, again, we're playing with stereotypes and tropes, and it does seem to work really well in that context. And I want to say also that on the page that y'all visited to watch the movie, if you scroll down, we actually have annotated the whole video so that you can go through and look at the time codes. And we've talked about what all of those images are. Some of them, again, are quite specific to our own personal family history. There's the photo of my grandfather as a child with his father in there, and of a stained glass window that's a memorial window church in South Carolina to my Civil War veteran great-great-grandfather. So some of these are very personal images, and the annotation talks about all these things and the reasons we made these different decisions in making the video. So yeah, good stuff.
So there's a question in the Q&A from Susan, and she says, David, I love the way your music shadows your music in honor of your ancestry, both sweet and challenging. The lyrics from Great Eagle to the land of my father's father, the lyrics from Look Away, my grandfather's own grandfather. Did you find images or words revisit you often to reveal something new? And she asked the same thing about imagery for me.
That is such a beautiful question. I find that I want to read it as well as hearing it, but I don't know where to find it.
It's in the Q&A, if you go below the chat on the right-hand side.
Where I was encouraging people to go and ask questions, right? But somehow, oh yeah, maybe there? No, there. Oh, there it is. Got it. Yeah, let me look at this. So
while you're looking at it, Susan, on my end, I would absolutely say yes. That when I make something, it's an exploration with the concept, and through the process, I learn from it, and new things come out for sure. Absolutely. For this particular project, one of the things that happened when we were working on the edit was that I wanted to do sharp cuts, and David really didn't want sharp cuts. And so I started to I dropped everything in at once, overlaying, and started to play with opacity. And because of that, we were able to tell a background story weaving through the visual, while also getting some motion into the frame throughout, that ties in a way that I just absolutely love how that ended up in the end. And so that's an example for your question from this part.
Yeah, I really love that, Hannah. I find the constant dissolves are just a little bit disorienting, and that's appropriate for this topic.
Right. It says the thing, right? It says the thing that I feel when I'm thinking about a subject.
Yeah, and we're trying to look at things that we thought we knew in a new way and see, oh, wait, there's a story behind that story and another one behind that. And I feel like that's right there present in the imagery. We worked on this really hard for months, and we made a lot of very intentional decisions, including some fairly subtle things like the very first scene has a sunrise in it and the very last scene has a sunset. Right. We were very intentional about lots of details. So we finally decided we had to make this this really elaborate page with all this annotation so that people who want to take the deep dive can. No obligation. But if you want to take the deep dive, it's there. I want to come back to Susan's question. That's a beautiful way of putting that. I do find that images and lyrics and stories come back and visit me again and reveal something new. And it's my favorite thing, actually. Language is such a wonderful thing to play with. I just enjoy it. And I love seeing something new in something that I thought I understood. And that's part of the reasons why I'm an etymology nerd. I just love looking up where words come from. And because often the etymology tells you a new story, like the fact that the word pacifist comes from pax and ficare, the fundamental action verb of Latin. Ficare means to do or to make, like hacer in Spanish or faire in French. It's the fundamental to do or to make. So to be a pacifist literally means to be a peace maker or a peace doer, whereas to be passive comes from totally different root words. Passus is the Latin to suffer, which is what you tend to do if you're passive, and it actually has no etymological similarity or common content with the word pacifist. So it's quite fascinating that it's an accident of history that these two words sound anything alike, and yet so much of the popular perception of what pacifism is what you don't do, right? By not being violent, then you're a pacifist. No, if you're not actively making peace, then you're not living into the etymology of that word. Wow, I just went on a nerd journey. Sorry, I went way off topic there. But to answer your question, yes, I do love revisiting, and I love when I am revisited by things that I understood in one way at one point in my life, and they come to mean something totally other at another time. Yeah, good stuff. So let's see. I want to answer one that I saw in the chat, and then I want to come to you, Ashley, and think about that. Monica, I saw your comment on German. Talk about the difference between guilt and responsibility. Yes, 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 and yes. I know your perspective on this may be different from mine, and you have a very personal perspective on it. I know that it's a complex story and there's a long way to go, and yet I am inspired by the example I've seen of how Germany has chosen to look pretty squarely, I mean, at least as compared to the United States, into the eyes of their history. I was moved when the movie Schindler's List came out. I was in Germany a few months later, and I heard that they had closed all the schools and sent every school child in the nation to see that movie on a school day. Wow. Can you imagine doing something like that in the United States? An honest reckoning with some very painful history. I think it's important to understand the story. And I think if it just feeds into guilt, that's not particularly productive. But if this can be the groundwork on which we begin to think about how do we heal this, which begins with repaying some of the debt, right? How do we move forward on this? And that's a really complicated conversation. It's not easy to figure that out. But I think we need to be talking about it. So that for you, Monica. Yeah, so Hannah, you want to talk to Ashley, or I can? Either way.
So Ashley asks, I keep trying to figure out how to go further than reading a book and relearning/relooking at history. You both have your art. How can you imagine your art pushing others of us to do something?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I have thoughts on that. You have some? I can go, or you can, as you like.
I say you go ahead, and I'll think about it.
All right. So, Ashley, I think, wow, this is a shameless plug, but I actually just wrote a whole book about that. Got a book coming out officially on the 25th of this month, a couple weeks from now. And it's called You Are Changing the World, Whether You Like It or Not. And I'm looking at a copy of it on the table. I did not have it there so that I could show it to y'all, but since it's there, I'm going to show it to y'all. I promise I did not set this up, but here you go. There's the book. And it's really a look at another cultural narrative that I want to challenge a little bit, because I found that what I thought I understood when I was younger looks very different to me now. And that is a narrative about social change. And I think we are kind of infected by a really popular cultural narrative that says that if you want to fix a large scale problem, what you need is somebody heroic, somebody really special to do something dramatic in a moment of crisis. And that's how you fix the problem, and then you roll the credits. And obviously that sounds ridiculous when we say it out loud like that, but it's the plot to most of our movies. It's how we teach history, even though it's not how history happened. I think it's like racism or sexism or any number of other things. It's something that we're soaked in our whole lives. We don't even notice it. So it's incredibly immobilizing. If you think heroes are who change things, and the rest of us don't really have a role in that except to clap, then the syllogism is heroes change things. I'm not a hero because I don't feel particularly heroic most mornings when I wake up. I don't know about you. Heroes change things. I'm not a hero. Therefore, it's not my job to change things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the real truth is that it's movements that change things. A lot of people doing a little bit each. That's really what makes the difference. I can't find an example in all of history of a hero affecting a large-scale change in the absence of a movement. Although there are examples of movements without a big charismatic leader changing big, large-scale things. The Arab Spring, the Arab Awakening, for instance, didn't really have a charismatic character that everybody rallied around. The person who sort of inspired it was a fruit vendor who killed himself and sort of led to these protests, but he was already gone before the protests started. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just really important to remember that it's not Pollyanna, it's not naive to say that little efforts matter. Little efforts really are how it happens. And I think all of us are truly transformed by relationship. So looking for little ways to create relationship, to weave back the fabric of society, which people are making a buck actively slicing up, right? It's not enough that we don't join them in slicing it up. I think we need to be working on sewing it back together. And you do that by relationship, by actually reaching out to your neighbors.
Interesting.
Like including neighbors who don't vote like you. Because I don't think we can talk about the hard things until we already have some relationship. I don't think we can demand that people are transformed in order to be in relationship. I think we have to be in relationship, and then we're all transformed. I'm transformed because I am able to see the humanity in somebody that I couldn't see before. And then when we have relationships, sometimes we can talk about the hard things, and we might not convince each other. It's not necessarily that we have to agree. That's not what peacemaking is. Peacemaking is finding a way forward together in the presence of our disagreement. So if the only thing that happens is that we see each other as human, that can actually prevent civil war. Because it's harder to kill somebody that you have a relationship with, right? So I think it comes down for me to small efforts in relationship. That's not to say that there aren't, politics are also important. I think it's good to be engaged there, but not in ways that shout people down. I think people are very seldom rejected into making more compassionate decisions.
Yeah, that's true. But people put up a wall.
Yeah, right. I mean, we just dig in when we shout at each other and insult each other. So I think we've got to start with relationship, and that's hard work. It's not easy, but it's really, really important.
And another thing that I think of as well with your question, Ashley, is the idea that something that's created could be then used in community. So, for example, this particular page that is on David's website now it's possible that communities could come together around the music video and the annotation and begin conversation that would then forward relationship and action. Because everyone's community space is specific and everyone's location is extremely important in this work in the entire United States of America or the world, really, when it comes to racism, because colonialism really touched everywhere. And I think so Ashley, I think that's my hope for the music video aspect of this particular project, because I think it's something that groups could look at and discuss and come together around.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thanks for that, Hannah. Yeah, I want to again go to something that Monica just said in terms of not being able to look at it all. Yeah, we can't look at it all. We can't do it all on any given day. I think it's really important to take a breath now and then, to take care of yourself. It's a little cliched now, but it's a pretty good metaphor that you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help the people around you. That's true. And it's a blurry line for me, honestly, when I feel like I'm trying to stay buoyant enough to do the work and at the same time not copping out. And it's really tricky. It's a very hard one for me. I'm really heartbroken about what's going on in Palestine right now. And that's such a touchy issue for so many people I love. And anti-Semitism is a real thing that is at work in the world, but not all criticism of the Israeli government is anti-Semitism. I just recall so clearly in the launch of the Iraq War, people told me I hated America because I opposed the war. No, don't hate America. I'm calling America to a higher version of itself, because this ain't the way. And I think history has borne me out that wasn't a good call, that war. No disrespect to the people who fought in it, but the folks who made that decision, I think, were wrong. So to offer a loving critique is legit. and yet this is such a painful thing for so many people that I love, that I find that I'm not as active on this issue as I feel like I should be. So I want to be super clear in all of this conversation that I'm not coming at this from a place of righteousness and telling other people that they're doing it wrong. I'm wrestling myself with the hard work that all of us are called to do, and how do we stay buoyant, and how do we maintain integrity to do the work that we need to do.
And bringing it back to the visual aspects of the video, we talked a lot about how just the visual interest of the storyline with your grandfather's grandfather with the rifle, and then when you turned your guitar upside down, the fret bar appeared to be the same, and so we have you walk through the shot at the very freezing cold early morning.
Yeah, we worked for that.
Yeah. Actually, we got some really great images in really uncomfortable situations for David, because it was extremely authentic pain.
It was really cold at Craggy when we were shooting up there.
Yes. So we come back to some of those spaces visually, because it is such a painful subject, and your expression was legitimately authentic in those moments.
Yeah.
But I thought that was such an interesting long-term generational story to go from the rifle to the guitar, and brings this forward to the gifts that you're giving and that we're giving through art.
Yeah, there are at least 2 points in the video that I think there's an interesting conflation between me and my great-great-grandfather, whose name was Thomas Jefferson LaMotte. No kidding. That's the guy we're talking about in the song. And that the one is where I'm carrying the guitar and it looks a bit like a rifle, and the other is when you dissolve into the stained glass window shot out of a bright sun that's in the background of the shot before it. And so when that shot comes in, you see the LaMotte when you still can't see the Thomas J. Mm-hmm. That could be me, right? And then that scene continues to dissolve and you see Thomas J. LaMotte. So I think there's power and something profound in that for me, in that, in some ways we are not our ancestors, right? And in other ways we kind of are. Mm-hmm. There is a connection that is deep and profound and to be wrestled with. I don't have clarity on that, but it's that's the beautiful thing about actually creating some art instead of just writing an essay about it, is that we can raise some questions with some ambiguity that allow you to interpret it through your own lens and figure out what this means to you, if anything. And that's it's a beautiful thing about art, that it's not. My favorite art is not instructive; it's evocative. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a place for instruction. I love education, but art isn't about what it puts in you; it is about what it draws out.
Yeah.
So the question is, where does it intersect with you and your story and your journey?
Yeah, if it's too instructive, it becomes just a literal instruction. And we see that a lot of times people want to use, it's powerful. Visuals are powerful, music is powerful. And if a person's using it to just move one agenda forward, it's effective, but it can also be harmful. And in these scenarios, particularly ways that churches and pulpits have moved theology to support slavery in the last 400 years, or to promote the pigmentocracy that we live in over the course of colonialism. Theology and the way that people were using language and visuals has really had a major impact. It's powerful and it's critical, and it's life and death.
Yeah.
And it's time to make a change.
Yeah, this is all about history. It's about them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. TJ, I appreciate that, your comment about small efforts and ripple effects, and I think that's absolutely true. Something I realized in the last year, actually, is that if I'm trying to forge relationship across lines, it's powerful sometimes to do something kind for the other person. But you know what's more powerful is letting them do something kind for you, um, because that indicates that they have the power, right?
Mm.
Which is a whole different dynamic. And I'll just throw that out there as a thing to think about because it struck me recently as something really powerful in trying to forge relationships across lines where there's a power differential in particular. Um, and that's sometimes harder, right, than doing something kind, which kind of bolsters your own sense of power. So accepting kindness is sometimes a very kind thing to do.
Mm.
We are amazingly like at 5 minutes before the hour. It blows my mind. And I thought maybe I would play this song live here to wrap things up. I'm really, really grateful to y'all for spending this time with us. It's such a joy. And I'm going to go ahead and share this publicly if that's all right with everybody. If anybody has any problem with their chat being public, please drop me a note and I'll figure out how to delete it. But otherwise, we'll share this publicly on the same page. And I want to say, let me just make the blatant commercial plug here. I want to just be honest with you about a thing, which is that when Hannah and I fell into this conversation, I had been thinking I want to make some music videos, but I had not thought specifically about doing this in this way with Hannah until the idea came up, and it was just immediately clear, like, oh, that's definitely what we need to do. I did not go home and think about it. I asked her about it in the moment because I really respect her art, and I said, hey, let's make a music video together. And so we did. Unlike making a record, there is no income stream whatsoever from a video like this. We just did it because we thought it was important. And it cost me a little over $4,000 to make the video. And I regret not a penny of that because it felt like it really mattered. But there are people in my life who tell me that I would be wiser when I'm considering a project to consider whether I can pay for it or not. and usually that doesn't occur to me until later. So if anybody wants to chip in, there are ways to do that, and Jess can share some links and stuff, and I'd welcome your support and your participation in this project if it feels like it matters to you. And if not, it's fine. I have no regrets about doing this. It's really good to be able to put it out in the world. So yeah, so thank you very much for all of it. And please join my mailing list if you want to keep in touch. Come join us on Patreon if you want. That's a joy to me, that community. And do keep in touch. And I really appreciate your time. And Hannah, I so appreciate going on this adventure with you. It has been such a beautiful project all the way through, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it. In some ways, now we're finally putting it out into the world, which means that we're kind of done, and now other people can have their own relationship with the project. So
I'm looking forward to seeing how it exists in the world.
Yeah, it's been nothing but a pleasure to work with you on this. Okay, so let me play a song. I think I know which one. It's actually a fairly hard song for me to play, just because I made up some chords that I don't play in any other song. So. My grandfather's own grandfather walked home from the Civil War, from Virginia to Columbia, SC. I don't know what made him join up, I don't know what he believed, but his legacy is passed right down to me. Way down south in the land of cotton, stories here are not forgotten, except when we prefer to look away. Rules were written to advantage, so the playing field is slanted. That's how it is still working to this day. Look away, I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven, you can tie a yellow ribbon That old oak tree is rotting at the core. Now the monuments to generals are all covered up in canvas, and some people say that's history they hide. But those statues tell a story that I cannot celebrate, treating people like those horses they are riding. I must listen to my sisters if I want to understand, though the story is a painful one to hear. If there's any hope of healing, they'll be hurting on the way. I think maybe we should start right now here. Look away. I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven. You can tie a yellow ribbon. That old oak tree is rotting at the core. Still love a good long story. I still love a cold sweet tea. I still love the people, black and white, who raised and nourished me. But my people told the story, and that story was a lie. And if we're ever gonna heal this, we gotta look it in the eye. Look away. I can't look away from history anymore. You can claim all is forgiven. You can tie a yellow ribbon. But that old oak tree is rotting at the core. You can claim all is forgiven. You can tie a yellow ribbon. But that old oak tree is rotting at the core. Thanks, y'all. Really good to be with you. Keep in touch. And now that, as of this hour right here, that website, that web page that we sent y'all to watch the video is public. And so please feel free to share it around, share it with folks if you want to have a conversation with your book group or whatever. It's out there now. So please feel free to share it as you like. And again, thanks for being here. I look forward to our paths crossing again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. And thanks, Jess.
Yes.